Dear students and teachers, welcome to the digital class. Today, let us learn about the key concepts of 8th and 9th biology textbook that are required for understanding 10th class biology concepts. In this session, we will try to understand the biodiversity, classification and ecosystems. Children, think about these questions. What is biodiversity? Are all kinds of living things found everywhere on earth? Are all the living things that once existed on earth still present? There are many kinds of plants and animals in the nature around us. They are unique about their color, shape, size and other characteristics, and every organism in nature has its own priority. This is called biodiversity. There are many plants and trees around us. When we look at these plants, each plant is different in shape compared to other plant. In the same way, every species has different characters compared to other species. These differences are in terms of their shape, color, size, or root system, or stem, branches, leaves, flowers and fruits. For example, if palm tree is compared to a mango tree, it has different roots, stems, leaves, branches. They differ in all these features. Even when mango trees are compared to each other, some of the features are different. You may have noticed that mangoes come in different shapes and sizes. In the same way, when we look at the animals, when a dog and an elephant is compared, their legs, eyebrows, ears, body structure, etc. are different. Even when two dogs are compared, it can be observed that some characters are different. Millions of humans on earth are not identical to each other except a few twins. They all have different facial features. You can observe the picture given. When we look at the faces of all these people, they are different. The organisms once lived in large numbers on earth and now declined rapidly are called endangered species. Blue jay and vulture are examples of our state. Similarly, the species which are vanished from earth forever are called extinct. For example, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are extinct species. That means they lived on earth once upon a time, but there are no more. Details of extinct and endangered species are included and published. The book is called the Red Data Book. Endemic species are the organisms that are restricted to a particular geographical area or country. Examples for endemic species are the kangaroo from Australia, the kiwi from New Zealand, and the peacock from India. What are established to protect endangered species? Human activities in the name of urbanization and development are damaging the existence of flora and fauna. That is why national parks and sanctuaries have been established for the protection of species. National parks are areas where wildlife is protected in their natural habitat over a vast area. There are so many national parks in our state as well as in our country. A sanctuary is an area that allows limited human activity without affecting the habitat of the species. The Government of India has established a number of sanctuaries in our state and country. Some sanctuaries are especially for birds, for the protection of birds only. By conserving forests, we can save many lives. What is the relationship between forest conservation and paper? About 15 to 25 trees needed to be cut down to make a ton of paper. So the less paper we use, the more trees will be preserved. By conserving forest, we can protect the biodiversity. Once the organisms have to face adverse conditions in their area, they move on to another area. The best example is migratory birds. Children, have you seen any migratory birds in your location? Why do birds migrate from one place to another place? Generally, birds migrate from one place to another to protect from winter cold intensity, food scarcity, and for reproduction purpose. You might have observed a flock of birds flying in the sky in a particular season. Children, till now we have studied about the different variations among the plants, animals, and human beings. These variations leads to diversity. So the diversity in the species helps in the classification of living organisms. So there is a relation in the characteristic features of the organisms and their classification. That means biodiversity is linked with the classification of organisms. What is the relationship between biodiversity and taxonomy? What does a scientific name of organisms indicates? The scientist Charles Darwin said that the organisms we see today have evolved over many years and developed new features. All these aspects were written in detail in the book The Origin of Species. We can find out which organisms have similarities in the taxonomic classification. The first classification was made by a scientist named Carolus Linnaeus. He proposed scientific names with two words for each organism. This is called the binomial nomenclature. The first word refers to genus and the second to species. According to this, the scientific name of man is Homo sapiens. We are currently following the classification of 5 kingdoms proposed by Whittaker. The order of the organisms in the taxonomy varies from species to life. So a group of similar species grouped under a genus. Few genus together forms a family. In the same way, related families are grouped under order. Order leads to class, and then class leads to phylum. Few phylums related to a kingdom, kingdom to domain, domain to life. What are the kingdoms proposed by Whittaker and what are their characteristic features? The 5 kingdoms proposed by Whittaker are Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Now let us see the characters of Monera. These are unicellular organisms. There is no nucleus in their cell. They move with flagella and cilia. They reproduce through binary fission. Example for Monera is nostoc and bacteria. When we look at the characteristic features of Protista organisms, most of these are unicellular, some are multicellular organisms. Nucleus is present in these cells. These organisms perform different functions with the nucleus. Fungi. Most of these are multicellular and some are unicellular organisms. They get nutrients by decomposing substances, especially the organic matter present in the plants and animals. They reproduced by formation of spores. Example for fungi is Mucor, Rhizopus, and Agaricus. When we look at the classification of plants, the kingdom of Plantae is classified into 2 groups, phanerogams and cryptogams. Phanerogams are flowering plants and non-flowering plants are grouped under cryptogams. And when we see the flowering plants, these are of 2 types, are grouped under 2 categories, gymnosperms and angiosperms. In gymnosperms, the seeds are visible. That means seeds are not enclosed by a sheet of fruit. They can be seen from the outside. Whereas in angiosperms, seeds are inside the fruit. Angiosperms are again classified into 2 groups. They are monocots and dicots. Monocots have only a single cotyledon, whereas dicots seeds have 2 cotyledons. The non-flowering plants are grouped into three categories: 𝗧𝗦𝗃, 𝗧𝗦𝗃 and 𝗘𝘅𝗺𝗃. 𝗧𝗦𝗃 plants undifferentiated body into roots, stems and leaves. 𝗧𝗦𝗃 plants, there is no real roots and leaves are found, but whereas true roots and leaves can be seen in 𝗘𝘅𝗺𝗃 plants. Now let us try to understand the classification of animals. Porifera. When we look at the characteristic features of porifera, these organisms have pores, holes on the body. They are non-motile. They are called sponges. Example, cycon and spongilla. Coelenterata organisms, the epidermis contains protective cells called stinging cells or cnidoblasts. These are diploblastic organisms. That means their body is covered by two membranes. Example, hydra and jellyfish. Platyhelminthes organisms, their body is flattened and these are triploblastic organisms. Example, planaria and earthworm. Nematoda organisms, the body of these organisms is cylindrical. They are parasites. Example, roundworms and filarial worms. Annelida, the body is differentiated into segments. They have a true body cavity. Example, earthworm and leech. Arthropoda, the phylum Arthropoda consists of insects. They have jointed legs. Example, cockroach and butterfly. Mollusca, when we look at the characteristic features of mollusca organisms, they have foot-like limb. Their body has little segmentation. Example, snail and unio or mussels. Echinodermata, these are spiny skinned organisms. They are free living marine organisms. Example, starfish. Protochordata, in these organisms, notochord is seen at any stage of their life. They are marine organisms. Example, Hadmenia and Amphioxus. When we look at the classification of vertebrates, vertebrates are classified into 5 groups. They are pisces, means fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals. Mammals are again classified into 3 groups. Land mammals, that means the mammals that lives on the land. Marine mammals means the mammals that lives in the seas and oceans. And flying mammals, these are the flying mammals that flies in the sky. Land mammals are grouped under 3 categories: marsupials, primates and rodents. Now let us see the characteristic features of vertebrates. Pisces or fishes, they have fin, tail and gills. A 2-chambered heart is present. These are cold-blooded animals. That means their body temperature depends upon the atmospheric temperature. Amphibians, these organisms can live on land and in water. 3-chambered heart is present. These are also cold-blooded animals. Example, frog. Reptiles, scaly skin is present. They have 3-chambered heart. These are also cold-blooded animals. Snake, garden lizard, etc. are the examples for reptiles. Birds are aves. These are feathered wings are present. 4-chambered heart is present. These are warm-blooded animals with claws on legs. Mammals, they give birth and feed babies with milk. 4-chambered heart is present. These are warm-blooded organisms. They live on the land, in the air and in the water. Marsupials, children, you might have seen the kangaroos. A bag-like structure is present in their abdomen for child care. Example, kangaroo. Primates, primates are advanced carnivores. They are intelligent and social creatures. Example, monkey and humans. Rodents. Rodents are the gnawing animals with jaws. Large incisors are used like chisel to gnaw and hard foods. Example, rabbit and rat. Marine mammals. Animals which grow and live in the sea water. Example, dolphin. Flying mammals. They are nocturnal, lives in dark habitat. That means these organisms come out during the night time for their food procurement. Example, bat. Dear children, we have seen that different organisms have different characteristic features. Based upon these characteristic features, they are classified into various phylums, groups, etc. So different organisms with different characteristic features lives in different ecosystems. Every ecosystem has biotic and abiotic components. Sunlight, water, air and soil are the abiotic components of an ecosystem, whereas plants, animals, microorganisms are the biotic components of ecosystem. So there is a relationship between abiotic components and biotic components. Now let us try to understand what kind of relationship is found among these biotic components and abiotic components. Food chain. The relationship for food among organisms in the ecosystem is represented by the food chain. Producers are the first nutrient level in the food chain. These are green plants. The next level consists of consumers. At this level, there are first herbivores, then carnivores. Microbes are the final level decomposers. So this kind of relationship is found in every ecosystem. Observe the following food chain. Every food chain starts with the producers. So producers are the basic producers that produce the food required for all the organisms in an ecosystem. Primary consumers obtain their food requirements from the producers, whereas secondary consumers obtain their food requirements from the primary consumers. Now, tertiary consumers obtain their food requirements from secondary consumers. So, producers prepares the food required for all the organisms in an ecosystem. These producers depends upon the sunlight as a source of energy. So, producers synthesize the food materials by a process called as photosynthesis using sunlight. See an example here. Flowers. Flowers are the producer. The butterflies are the primary consumers. They obtain their food requirement from the flowers. And frog is the secondary consumer as it is dependent upon the butterfly, which is a primary consumer. Snake is the tertiary consumer that obtain its food requirement from the frog. So if we look at the classification of an ecosystem, ecosystem is of two types: natural ecosystem and artificial ecosystem. Artificial ecosystem is the ecosystem that is made by man. So man-made ecosystem is called artificial ecosystem. For example, a garden. Whereas natural ecosystem is classified into two groups, that is terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystem consists of grassland ecosystem, forest ecosystem and desert ecosystem, whereas aquatic ecosystem is of two types: marine ecosystem, that is sea and oceans; freshwater ecosystem, that is rivers, ponds, lakes, etc. Every ecosystem consists of producers, consumers and decomposers. For example, producers of the forest ecosystem include plants, creepers, shrubs and large trees. Primary consumers include deer, elephants and rabbits. All the primary consumers are herbivores, that means they directly obtain their food requirements from the plants. So they are called herbivores. Secondary consumers are carnivores because they eat the other animals. Mostly they eat the herbivores. So the secondary consumers in the forest ecosystem include tigers, wolves and lions. Decomposers include bacteria and fungi. These bacteria and fungi depends on the dead plant and animal bodies. They destruct the plant and animal bodies and adds the nutrients back to the environment. The mangrove ecosystem is where the river water joins with the sea water. So the producers in this ecosystem are mangrove plants and some type of algae. Consumers include crabs, prawns, snails and turtles, whereas bacteria such as detritus are decomposers. Organisms that live in different ecosystems have certain adaptations to the environment related to that ecosystem. Without those adaptations, they cannot survive. That means to tolerate the environmental conditions and depends upon the nature of the habitat, organisms adopt certain kind of modifications in their body. They may be plants or they may be animals. What adaptations do organisms in different ecosystems have? Now let us learn about the adaptations of organisms in the desert ecosystem. The desert ecosystem has plant species like opuntia and cactus. The stem stores water, so they are juicy. Leaves are modified as spines and these leaves are reduced so that they can prevent loss of water from plants. Children, look at this picture. What you are finding here? These are looking like stones, but these are not stones. These are plants. These are called pebble plants. The bulging leaves of the plant look like stones. These are adapted to protect against herbivorous animals. The camel has legs to protect it from the hot sand, a fat storage hump, nostrils and long eyebrows prevent sand from falling. Side wider adder snake crawls sideways without touching the hot sand. The golden mole swims through the sand. The kangaroo rat lives without drinking water throughout its life. The fennec fox has fur on its legs and is protected from hot sand. Thus the organisms in each ecosystem are adapted in many ways to adapt to the conditions there. That means every ecosystem has different climatic conditions. So depends upon those climatic conditions and abiotic components, the organisms live in that ecosystem have adopted so many kinds of modifications in their body. The marine ecosystem is divided into three zones based on pressure, temperature, light and depth. They are euphotic, bathyal and abyssal zones. There are three types of zones in a freshwater ecosystem. They are littoral, limnatic and profundal zone. What adaptations frog shows according to the weather? Some species of frogs shows winter sleep and summer sleep. Winter sleep is called hibernation, summer sleep is called estivation. This is to tolerate adverse environmental conditions. Polar bears also show winter sleep, that is hibernation. Children, till now we have studied various types of ecosystems and the adaptations shown by the organisms lives in different ecosystems. Now let us try to see the main points of today's session and evaluation part also. There are many types of plants and animals in the nature around us. What is unique about color, shape, size and other characteristics are that everything in nature has a priority. This is called biodiversity. The organisms once lived in large numbers on earth and now declined rapidly are called endangered species. Blue jay and vulture are examples of our state. Similarly, The species which are vanished from earth forever are called extinct. For example, dinosaurs. Endemic species are the organisms that are restricted to a particular geographical area or country. Examples are the kangaroo from Australia, the kiwi from New Zealand, and the peacock from India. Human activities in the name of urbanization and development are damaging the existence of fauna. That is why national parks and sanctuaries have been established for the protection of species. The first classification was made by a scientist named Carolus Linnaeus. He proposed scientific names with two words for each organism. This is called the binomial nomenclature. The first word refers to genus and the second to species. Whittaker proposed 5 kingdoms, namely Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. Every ecosystem consists of biotic and abiotic components. Abiotic components such as sunlight, air, soil and water, etc. Plants, animals and microorganisms are biotic components. The relationship for food among organisms in the ecosystem is represented by the food chain. Producers are the first nutrient level in the food chain. These are green plants. The next level consists of consumers. At this level, there are first herbivores, then carnivores. Microbes are the final level, decomposers. Organisms that live in different ecosystems have certain adaptations to the environment related to that ecosystem. Without those adaptations, they cannot survive. The camel has long legs to protect it from the hot sand, a fat storage hump, nostrils, and long eyebrows to prevent sand from falling. The marine ecosystem is divided into 3 zones based upon pressure, temperature, light and depth. They are euphotic, bathyal and abyssal zones. There are 3 types of zones in a freshwater ecosystem. They are littoral, limnatic and profundal. Some species of frogs shows winter sleep, that is called hibernation, and summer sleep, which is called estivation, to tolerate adverse environmental conditions. Polar bears also show winter sleep. Children, today we have seen this. Now let us go for evaluation part. Children, it is advised to note down these questions and try to answer them. Evaluation. Compare the characteristics of any 2 plants and animals. Write examples of endemic and endangered species. What is the objective of setting up national parks and sanctuaries? Why do birds migrate? Write the characteristics of any 5 phyla of invertebrate and the names of the organisms in that category. Write about the types of mammals and their characteristics. Draw a flowchart showing the classification of plants. Write some adaptations of desert plants and animals. Write about the classification of water ecosystem. Dear children, today we have learnt about the biodiversity and classification of organisms and ecosystems. I hope that all these key concepts helps you for better understanding the biology concepts of 10th class. So let us meet once again with another topic and another day. Thank you.